You can't kill me, I'm already dead. Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Stagecoach, the only podcast in the world celebrating films where stagecoaches explode. Now, in the 1930s and 40s, Universal Studios introduced cinema-goers to a series of iconic characters from horror and fantasy, including Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman. Over the following years, in an increasingly labyrinthine series of sequels, Universal brought these characters together in a shared universe that was sadly never called the Universal Universe. Fast forward to the noughties, and Universal had plans to recreate this world of monsters, starting with the film we're reviewing today, 2004's Van Helsing. To help me review the film, I'm joined on the box seat by science's maddest experiment, a man capable of sending a chill down any spine. It's my good friend Nick Rehack. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Will. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm very well. But I wanted to kick off with a question inspired by the film that we're watching today. And I wanted to know whether you would rather be a werewolf, a vampire, or would you prefer to have bits of you, or would you rather prefer to be reanimated as a sort of patchwork monster?
I'm not going to lie, I think I would go werewolf.
I want to know why.
I think with vampire, there's too many rules. Right? It's just, you got to worry about garlic, you have to worry about steaks, you have to worry about all these different things and sucking blood and feeding and doing all this stuff. You kind of have to still interact with people. Whereas a werewolf, you're just a regular dude, and every so often it's like, ooh, I gotta, hey gang, yeah, enjoy yourselves tonight. I'm going to stay home and not have to deal with the moonlight for a little bit. But even if I do turn into the moon, I'm just this beast, and I get to run around in the woods and feast and eat and then just wake up like nothing happened and go back to my day-to-day. Yeah, sign me up for that. Like, I'll do that all day. You still get to go outside, you run amok, people will avoid you. It takes a silver bullet to kill you. Not everybody might not realize that at first. You're getting hit with other bullets. Yeah, it's going to hurt, but you're still alive and living. And when they turn into these wolves, they're like ripped, jacked looking dudes, I'll go for that all day, because I am not a very athletic person. So to all of a sudden have that like ability and personage, it's just like, look at me, huh? I could go lifting weights as a werewolf. I could knock out who knows how many push-ups. So werewolf all day.
So a six-pack and a lack of bureaucracy. Those are the sort of most appealing aspects.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Just this little anarchist at work. Little hairy anarchist running around.
Okay, I think it's time to grab our steaks, silver bullets and holy water and take a deep dive into gothic horror. So let's see if Hugh Jackman can describe Van Helsing's character in a suitably portentous way.
My life. My job. My curse is to vanquish evil.
His name is Van Helsing.
Some say you're a holy man. Others say you're a murderer. Which is it?
It's a bit of both.
He has come to a forbidden land to battle enemies that are legend.
Oh my God.
This summer, evil has one name to fear. Hugh Jackman is Van Helsing.
In 1887 Transylvania, Dr. Frankenstein, with the help of Count Dracula, creates a monster. However, Dracula kills Frankenstein when he refuses to comply with his plans for the creature. A year later, Gabriel Van Helsing, a monster hunter secretly working for the Pope, is sent to Transylvania to destroy Dracula and protect Anna and Velkan Valorius, the last of an ancient family sworn to kill Dracula. That effort becomes more complicated when Velkan is turned into a werewolf under the control of Dracula, who has been using Frankenstein's monster to bring his undead children to life. This sets the stage for a final showdown between Van Helsing and Dracula as the forces of good and evil finally collide. The film was written and directed by Stephen Sommers, who'd made his name with The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. The cast here is headed up by Hugh Jackman and Kate Beckinsale, who'd already had experience battling vampires in the previous year's Underworld. Now, this film was an attempt by Universal to revive their famous monster universe that had been so successful in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. However, those plans were abandoned in the wake of the negative critical reaction to this film, which I clearly remember. And this had a rather reputation of a stinker at the time of its release. As for the public, they seem to be a bit kinder on it. The film has a user rating of 6.1 out of 10 on IMDb and a 2.8 out of 5 user rating on Letterboxd. So, with all of that out of the way, Nick, what did you make of Van Helsing?
I mean, it's fine. It's not the worst, but it's definitely not as good as I remembered it being. When I first saw this, I think it was like high school, might have been 9th or 10th grade when I saw this, and I was like, oh, it's pretty cool, they're fighting monsters, stuff like that. But like as I've gotten older, I'm like, man, this could be way better. Like, the plot that you described sounds really cool, and that's a movie that I for sure want to see. But then on the execution of it, it's like we've got some very inconsistent accents. We have people that are chewing the scenery, and then they're like over chewing the scenery, and it's like, no, we get it. Nobody wanted to rein it in at any point. The director clearly didn't direct and say, hey, let's take it back just a hair. And then maybe it's just me. It was too quippy for me. I feel like everybody was making quips left and right, and it's like, that's not what this movie is. Sure, have a couple jokes peppered in, like Batman, you know what I mean? Just a very solemn character, and he gets like maybe 3 little jokes or 3 little smirky remarks throughout the film. But it felt like there was like a setup and a punchline, and everybody was either setting up or landing a punchline. And I mean everybody. Like, even Igor was getting in on it. Like, it kept taking away from the tone. So if you're trying to do this monster thing, I'm not saying go dark and gritty and stuff, but just have a consistent tone. So this way I know to be like, oh, I'm genuinely concerned for these characters, or just like, they'll get through it. It's fine. So I think just that general inconsistency, along with, not the best performances, it just makes it not great, But again, not the worst. I've seen way worse, but not great.
Yeah, it sounds like I've got a very similar viewpoint to your own. I mean, I do think this is an unholy mess of a movie. I think that it's terribly overstuffed. It feels like a trilogy of films squashed into one movie, and it is absolutely chock-a-block with non-stop action, and then occasionally a film breaks out around it. And I think the idea and the concept here is not necessarily a bad one, but it really just comes down to the execution. And this film got terribly panned, as inevitably any film that costs as much money as this did, that is a sort of a big tentpole release for a studio where you've got so many iconic characters being reinvented for the big screen. I mean, it's obviously going to come under a lot of scrutiny, and if you don't stick the landing, well, then you are going to get a lot of critical pelters. I do agree with you. It's fine. I mean, it's not awful, but it's certainly a long way short of a good movie. But I did think that this film bit off more than it could chew. You've got Dracula here, you've got Van Helsing, who are obviously normal sparring partners, but we've also got Dr. Frankenstein, his monster, Igor, werewolves. There's a brief appearance of Jekyll and Hyde, or Mr. Hyde at least, and it just felt to me like they were trying to fit a quart into a pint pot. I mean, is that your take as well?
No, absolutely. The more you talk about it, it for sure sounds like they said, hey, let's put the Avengers out, and then we'll go back and do Iron Man. They kind of just get everybody thrown in there at once. And honestly, when they started popping up, I'm like, I couldn't remember the movie. So when I'm rewatching it, I'm like, hold on, does the Invisible Man show up at some point? Because so far, all these other people are rolling through. So it only makes sense that would be the case. But yeah, it's just, it's over chalked with it. If they'd have taken out the werewolf side and just left Dracula and Frankenstein's monster because of how they set up the beginning, okay, I'm cool with that. And maybe at the end, someone gets hit with a serum, and then there's a werewolf, and that sets up a second film, or at least that sets up another story or adventure to like kind of leave you in suspense or tease or something like that. He says to what was Kate Beckinsale's character name? Anna. He could be like, Anna, I haven't seen your brother in a couple weeks. We have to go after him. They get on a carriage. Off they go into the distance credits. Like, okay, so we know that, they're taking on a werewolf next. And you keep weaving in vampires or doing your thing. But no, I think you're absolutely right that it's too jam-packed with stuff. And at a 2-hour-ish runtime, it does a pretty decent job of keeping the pace. But because it has to touch and do on so many different things, it's not like the film really has any time to breathe. So it's not like we get to have any genuine time with these characters. And when we do, like I said earlier, they're just kind of quipping and making little jokes back and forth. And it's like, okay, but I want just a little bit more. I mean, again, I know it's a Monster Hunter movie, but I do want just a little bit more out of the Monster Hunter movie than just monsters and quips,
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And I've probably said this many times before on this podcast about, a whole variety of different films. But if I don't care about the characters and the story, then it doesn't matter how good the action is. I am always going to struggle to love this film. And this film, I actually think the action and the set pieces are all good or great, but the story, such as it is, just doesn't have any time to breathe. We don't really get to sort of spend any time with the characters. They're all pretty like one-dimensional, and we understand their basic motivations, but that's kind of about it. And I didn't get invested in this film as a consequence of that.
And if anything, it becomes eye-rolling when you're not investing in these characters either, because there's a moment when he's going through his gadgets, a la James Bond, and he's like, we got this, and you're kind of rolling your eyes like, all right, we get it. Or because it does visually look impressive. There's
totally.
sometimes when they do the the outdoor scenes where they're looking at a castle or something, it looks very reminiscent of like the 30s and 40s and how those films would look. Even the design and the decor and the costumes and everything, it's of its time with like just a hair steampunky, but not so over the top to where it gets that steampunk like cliche and you're just like, ugh, it's just a steampunk this or steampunk that. It all works and looks really well within, but because of the characters, because again, we just don't really care, then you kind of stop caring, like you said, about the action and about the universe as a whole, because what's the sense in it? You know what I mean? If you don't like this person, you kind of don't want them around. You're looking for other things to enjoy, and then you start to not enjoy them. And obviously, the CGI will be a huge part of the conversation and its overuse. But at the same time, how else are you supposed to have all of these tremendous scenes that you have with bat creatures flying around and werewolves? Like, it's bound to happen. But again, if you don't care, then you really don't care.
Yeah. Well, I think the other issue is that actually this film treats its characters quite badly. I mean, these are iconic characters that this film is dealing with, but they're just thrown into the mix kind of any old fashion. I mean, the film opens up with, a scene with Dracula, and we've got Dr. Frankenstein there and his monster. And really, Dr. Frankenstein, he gets bumped off within the first 5 minutes of the movie, and he's just gets to deliver sort of like a callback line to the original Universal horror movies from the 1930s and 40s, and he's then just junked out of the picture. And I don't think we need to be have complete reverence for these films and these characters. Like we can do things differently and play with them, but as I say, these are just sort of like iconic characters. We should be excited to see them come together in this way. We shouldn't just sort of open up the action. They're all in the same scene together, and one of them gets bumped off in a kind of throwaway manner.
Yeah, because there's a way to do it that's fun and exciting and being like, oh, wow, he's in there. Like, look at all these guys coming together versus doing it for the sake of doing it. Because like you said, Dr. Frankenstein, obviously a much bigger figure. Even if you look at the Wolfman, they just kind of, knock him back to just a crazed beast, right? They don't look at this person that's fighting the dichotomy inside of them and trying to, become man over wolf. And there's just no connection there. And then Frankenstein's monster, if you will, he is the only one that kind of gets a little bit of yearning and a longing, and he's like, I just want to live, I just want to exist as a person. And so he's trying to do things in order to make that happen, but the presentation of his character is not like presentations of the past. Now, I'm not saying they have to be exactly the same and there's special rules, and like you said, we have to hold these so prestigious and near and dear to our hearts. But when you're introducing a character like that, there's some things that you still have to kind of stay with because of audience expectations and what they know of the characters. So while it is cool that they're doing some things different with Frankenstein's monster and kind of showing that humanity within him, they take away the humanity from everybody else. And so you just have this crazed wolf beast. Dracula is just an over-the-top, wants to rule the world kind of guy. And then you got Van Helsing and Anna running around, and it's like, okay, these two are fun, but they become the least interesting people. And Van Helsing, for us, if we're meeting this character for the first time like we are in the film, he should be like really mysterious, and every little bit as we go through gives a little more to his backstory, like, oh, well, he works for the Pope, that's crazy, he does this, like he does all these different things. But after a while you're just like, yeah, okay because there's not that extra dimension, there's not that extra layer of like characters, and it's really easy to have that in a film like this, too. You just give everybody an extra 5 minutes, explore a little bit of something within them, kind of hearken to it as the film goes, and you have something with just a little more meat on the bones, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, and it's not just the fact that you've got all of these iconic characters just crashing together in the same film. I mean, this film also takes a lot of liberties with the lore of these films and these books. And again, it's not about the fact that they've taken these liberties. I think it's just about the totality of things that they are asking us to absorb as an audience. So you've got all of these iconic characters crashing together in, ways that, variously make sense or don't make sense. But you've also got the fact that Van Helsing is sort of an agent of this secret society run by the Vatican to try and keep down evil around the world. It also seems that Van Helsing is possibly hundreds of years old. That if there was an explanation for that, I must have missed it because I was trying to keep up with everything else. As you say, there's this sort of idea of a steampunk element into it, in the fact that Van Helsing has these fantasy imagined weapons, like a sort of crossbow that sort of seems to work like a machine gun, and these kind of spinning saws that he can throw around. And yeah, Dracula can control werewolves. Maybe that's cropped up somewhere before, but I'd been unaware of it. So I think all of those are actually quite exciting ideas. But there's just too many of them, and it's too many of these characters together, and it just feels like you said earlier, it's just like they decided to go straight to the Avengers and not build up the world around it before bringing them all together in this movie.
And it's not just a confluence of characters either. It's also storylines. They keep introducing plot after plot after plot. And at one point, like you're talking about, Dracula yells at Van Helsing, calls him Gabriel. And he's like, what are you talking about? And all of a sudden it's like, okay, here's something interesting. Let's explore that further. He's like, oh yeah, you killed me before. And Van Helsing's almost standing there like, I don't know what you're talking about. They never explore that fuller or further. No. They never say like, oh yeah, these two have been locked in a battle since time immemorial, and he's just, a rebirth and a reincarnation. It's none of that stuff. Not even like a title thing. Like, yeah, the Van Helsing before you killed the Dracula before me. Even something wild and goofy as that would have been intriguing. Instead, we get these occasional throwaway lines, and it's like, oh, okay, so where does that take us? Oh, it doesn't go anywhere? Or they just forget about some plots altogether, and they have to remind you, like, oh yeah, he has 2 wives, so Dracula's wives have to come in every so often and just remind us that they exist. Or, oh yeah, the whole plot is he's got thousands of kids he wants to bring back to life. Oh yeah, let's touch on that again. Like,
yeah, I think the worst part of the plotting for me was the scene, very brief scene, where the monster has been captured and he's dragged past, and he's able to shout to Van Helsing how, he's able to sort of deliver some vital exposition to Van Helsing about how he will ultimately be able to defeat Dracula. And it's just... let's just have the monster whiz past, chuck out some exposition, and we can get on to the next set piece.
Yeah, I mean, they could have even parsed that off to somebody else. Like you said, he meets at least the Mr. Hyde side of Dr. Jekyll, and for what? Like, for what? What do we really need to see that for? We didn't. That could have been easily like, hey, I've been working on this theory or theorem, and this is what I've got going on, and it allows us to think, oh, okay, in the back of our minds, let's keep this idea that this is how you could possibly defeat Dracula, or this is how you could possibly, combat this aspect or that. Like, something could have been done that way, and then I was like, okay, kind of neat. But to have it in there for the sake of having it in there, it's like, okay, what are we really doing here? Are we trying to truly use this as the linchpin and establish an entire universe? So we're throwing every possible character we can at you at once? Or is this just a guy, Stephen Sommers, who's a huge fan of the classic Universal monsters, and he just wants to put all of his favorites in there? Which, if that's the case, I would too. Like, if I was given, however many millions of dollars to make a movie about that world, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to throw in every possible character and Easter egg I can, but I also want it to make sense. And it's some stuff just, and again, it's a Monster Hunter movie, so talking about things making sense and not making sense, I get it. But from a character and from a story and from a film aspect, some things, they have to make sense.
Yeah, I mean, he did such a great job, Stephen Sommers, such a great job with the Mummy. And actually, I like all of those movies. I think he directed the first two. I think he wrote them as well. He did such a great job with those. And yeah, it does feel to me like he's given, the keys to the entire franchise, and he's just he's just got overexcited, and he's just try to cram too much stuff in here, and it's a real shame, because there's actually, I was, we've spoken a lot, made a lot of criticisms of this film, but I actually think the look of this film is really good. I mean, it's really heavily influenced by those Universal horror movies of the 30s and 40s, but I actually thought the visuals here were one of the sort of the strongest features of this movie, and I've watched it a couple of times for this podcast, and there's so much going on in the background of the scenes that you really have to admire, like the set design and the artwork of this film.
Yeah, especially because a film like this nowadays would be just nonstop CGI, blue screen, green screen, motion capture elements, all that stuff. And they could have easily gone that route with this. Now, obviously, again, you do for the action of the bat creatures and the Wolfman and stuff, but these are physical, tangible sets that they're in. These are physical, tangible places, and it adds to that level of depth and dimension. And also, this is a pretty colorful film. It's not crazy washed out or bleak or sepia tone or anything to give it like an extra added layer of, doom and gloom or anything, because nowadays, again, it would have been gray washed, or it wouldn't look as natural as this film kind of does. And there's something to appreciate about that too. It's an artistic choice that I think works, and it just adds to the visual presentation of the film, which again is, like you said, is really well done. Like, it looks good. It's just, if you could fix those 2-3 other little caveats, not caveats, but just, you could just do so much more with it. You have a great base level. Now build on top of that with your great base.
Okay, I think we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the Exploding Stagecoach action.
In a world where podcasts already seem to address every imaginable subject, one man broke new ground with a seemingly random obsession about exploding helicopters in movies. He was a podcaster on the edge, a maverick broadcaster who played by his own rules. Now, he has a last chance to talk about the strange way helicopters explode in film. Exploding Helicopter, available on iTunes and Podomatic now. Think you know about chopper fireballs? Think again.
We're back, and now we're looking at the Exploding Stagecoach action, and we have one, possibly even two, exploding stagecoaches to look at. The film's key scene occurs when Van Helsing attempts to keep Frankenstein's monster out of Dracula's hands by transporting him to Rome. To do so, they naturally choose the 19th century's premier form of transport, the stagecoach. As they race along some wooded roads, they're attacked by two of Dracula's brides. The stagecoach hurtles towards a gorge. Unfortunately, the bridge across it is broken. Van Helsing urges his team of horses on, and they clear the gap, but the stagecoach doesn't make it and plummets to the bottom of the gorge. The vampires give chase, thinking the monster is aboard, but it turns out it's all been an elaborate trap. The patchwork human horror is elsewhere, and the falling stagecoach is set to trigger some hidden explosives that, when detonated, take care of the vampires and the stagecoach. Nick, what did you make of the Exploding Stagecoach action?
I'm not gonna lie, it was exciting. The chase leading up to it, I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did, and it was just kind of, it was fun, and then it wasn't, and then it was fun again, if that makes sense. So they're going through, as soon as the stagecoach hits that gap and the coach part does not make it over the bridge and starts to plummet into the deep ravine, which I think the depth gives the runway length in the Fast and Furious films a run for its money, because that is a deep gorge that it is going down. I mean, we're there for a little bit. That part gets like a little hokey at times just because of how far we are falling and how far we are going down. I think the execution is great. I think the stagecoaches are beautiful. And also, I think it's kind of a creative way to not only use it as a bomb, which often does, but just kind of a distraction and traveling bomb. Because other times we get stagecoach bombs, like in Django Unchained, it's just kind of sitting there and hanging out. And people kind of are near it, and it's used as a distraction or as an attention getter. This one is both. This stagecoach is, hey, follow me, and then as soon as you're ready for it, bam, explosion, debris going everywhere, impaling some vampires. My biggest complaint, though, is because we are impaling the vampires like that, we do not get the full explosion on the stagecoach. It's kind of dampened a little bit. It's hidden behind the vampire lady, and it kind of hurts. We do get the initial burst, and I think that's great, but we don't get the fullness, especially that second explosion that comes after it, right? That second wave. We don't get the full impact, and it hurts a little bit because it again could have been great. Could have been one of the best exploding stagecoaches ever. But
they think we're worrying about the vampires, and we're really not. Our focus is on the stagecoach, and
yeah, absolutely. And it just it's almost there, and then they kind of take it away from you last minute, and it's like, if only.
Yes, I mean, there is certainly a lot to enjoy here, and I agree with you. You know, as they say, anticipation is half the pleasure. So the long, implausibly long descent of the stagecoach into the gorge does heighten your expectation of the thrill when it finally explodes. And yeah, what an explosion it is! I mean, you know, who doesn't like to see wooden-wheeled transportation splinter into hundreds and thousands of pieces into one big ball of fire and flame? And yes, I certainly enjoyed the exploding stagecoach action here. Do have to I agree with you, we do need to knock a little mark off for the fact that the director feels compelled in terms of telling the story to focus the attention at that moment on the fate of Dracula's brides, but there's still, I think, enough here for Exploding Stagecoach fans. Well, more than enough for Exploding Stagecoach fans here to enjoy. But maybe we should be enjoying this film even more, because we need to discuss another moment here, because the monster, as we find out, is aboard another stagecoach, which is attacked by a werewolf. And during this tussle, the stagecoach catches fire and later crashes and splinters apart. Now, ever since this film came out, this scene has been the subject of much controversy among Exploding Stagecoach fans. Some say it doesn't actually explode, while others vehemently argue that this is a valid exploding stagecoach. Now, Nick, I know I'm putting you on the spot here because, when we were prepping for this, I know you were reluctant to get involved in the exploding stagecoach culture wars. It's really polarized the community, but I'm going to need you to help me to adjudicate on this scene. So, should this one be counted in the exploding stagecoach canon?
I do not believe it should be counted. And I say that because we have a stagecoach that is gorgeously engulfed in flames. I mean, gorgeously. As they're riding, the top of the stagecoach is lit in flame, right? As the Wolfman is getting up, he slices the roof of it, and the flame starts to get into the stagecoach itself. The doors are opening as people are jumping off, so we're getting more oxygen into the stagecoach. We're creating more and more fire. The whole thing is a beacon of excitement and flame and anticipating an exploding stagecoach. However, as we tumble and roll, the flames get bigger, but there is not an explosion. There is not an immediate burst of flame going in any direction. Now, if the scene went for another 5 seconds, just 5 seconds, I think we would have seen our explosion. I think they cut away just before it explodes, and therefore it's like maybe like a 0.9. Right? Like this has 1.9 exploding stagecoaches, but it's just that littlest bit. Again, if you have 5 more seconds, I think we get our explosion, but until then, it's just collateral damage.
Well, I agree with you, Nick. I'm going to plant my flag in the sand here, and yeah, for me, this is not an exploding stagecoach. this is a disintegrating stagecoach. It is a falling apart stagecoach. It is not an exploding stagecoach. And I respect other people within the exploding stagecoach community. I can understand why there is such debate about this particular sequence, this particular scene. There is, so much flame here. That stagecoach, it comes apart in quite a dramatic fashion, but not as a result of an explosion. And, that is where I have to draw the line. And, this might be a painful listen for some people out there. And, all I can say to them is that you, Nick, are one of the most authoritative and respected voices. And, you've now spoken on this issue. You've come out with your verdict, and hopefully people are willing to listen to your arguments, listen to your rationale, and hopefully this can go some way to healing the schism that exists within the Exploding Stagecoach community.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, I think that just about wraps things up for this show. Nick, before you head off, do you want to take a moment to plug anything you've got going on at the moment?
Absolutely. If you head over to rabbitholepodcasts.com, I am over in that network, and I'm just everywhere I can be. I'm going to be honest. I love hearing the sound of my voice, so any chance I get to put it on somebody else's show, I will. I am on Lyrical Innuendo. Myself and Bubba Wheat take a look at the song, and we determine if what the lyrics are really about. Myself and Jason Soto are watching every single episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000 from the beginning. That's been an adventure and a joy. And I also pop up on other shows within the network, so just head over there, rabbitholepodcasts.com, and check all that out.
As always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Stagecoach website for more reviews of films where stagecoaches explode. We'll be back soon, but until then, what should people do, Nick?
Keep watching the highways for those exploding stagecoaches. This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
There's something down here. And it's carnivorous. Whatever it is, it appears to be human. I'd say it's a size 17, about 360 pounds, 8.5 to 9 feet tall. He has a bad gimp in his right leg and 3 copper teeth.
How do you know he has copper teeth?
Because he's standing right behind you. Move!